Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to our very first remote coaching lesson for our Module 1, Session 1, for our Introduction to IT Project Management. I'm Sir Eyes or Sir Eisel. I'll be your IT E083 IT Project Management instructor in this first semester. So, good afternoon, good morning, good evening to those of you who watch this in different time frame. So today we're going to be discussing about the Module 1 Session 1 introduction. There's two sessions in Module 1 as I've discussed in our last orientation. And today we're just going to be discussing the half of the session because each module is cut into two or divided into two sessions. Okay, so let's start. So we're going to be discussing Module 1 Session 1, Introduction to IT Project Management. And for our learning objectives, okay, so at the end of this module, the student should be able to, number one, define an IT project. We're going to be defining what is an IT project, what is a project, what is project is all about. Second is identify the characteristics of an IT project. What are the four constraints or why are projects limited? Number three is explain project constraints. We're going to be learning those, how important it is for the constraints to be able to be present on a project. Number four is describe the agile mindset. This is going to be the session two for module one. Compare agile and waterfall. These are the methodologies that we're going to be discussing in our session two. Identify a simple IT project idea. Before we start, as part of our active learning process, as I've discussed last week about active learning, there's going to be a question and answer portion first, or contribution of ideas relating to this topic before we start, just to keep our minds active. So for a warm-up activity, you think about a technology system you used regularly. It could be an enrollment system for this example, and there's actually a lot of systems. So I'll give you 5 seconds to think of it. Okay, so there's a lot of system or technological system out there that we use regularly. Say, for example, aside from enrollment system in school, there's a POS system or from the cashiers, or there are also ordering system, appointment system from different stores. Those are the systems that we used regularly. Those are projects or once project that have been developed over time and was delivered and used by these businesses. Another question is name one IT project you've experienced. Recall from your first year projects because you're second year now. So you're going to encounter a lot of or experiencing a lot of IT project in the future, but recalling your first year project. I think last week, I've asked you this question about what was your project when you were still in first year, and most of you responded that you were creating websites, you were creating about research, about portfolios of that specific website that you are building. So those are the things that you recall, and there are more things that you will experience or building a project by forming a team or actually working alone in this second year. So I want you to actually have it in mind that there will be a future projects or systems that we need to build in order for us to actually embed the idea or remember the idea of IT is centered in actually building these projects and building the system. Another question would be what challenge could happen during development? Recall from your first year, you were creating a website or different projects. Now, what were the challenges that you've experienced before? It could be from the member, is it from the groups of friends, is it from the building of a project, or maybe there are bugs that you've encountered, there are things that you probably missed and you've just realized that during your performance or during the delivery of your system and your final outputs, and there will be a lot of realization maybe from submitting your designs, or it could be there's a lot of options out there. So those were the challenges that you've experienced during development. So those things that I've asked you are part of a project. Now we define them as, part of the building block of being able to develop what? A project, right? So what is an IT project? You define an IT project. I'll give you 5 seconds before we start in this main session. Okay. So an IT project is a temporary effort to create a unique technology product, service, or system. When we say temporary, it has a start and an end. You will remember that because, in the next slides, you'll be remembering that IT project is always temporary effort, meaning it has a start or an end, right? There will always be no forever, just like love, of course. There will always be an end to everything. Well, I don't know. You guys can relate to that. So when we say start and an end, from a start of building an IT project, there will always be an end where you actually what? Submit your output. And that is a project. That happens a lot in every project. Let's say, for example, a school system. There are developers out there that they could be maintaining the project, but it always comes with a start and an end point. Maybe it could be specifically in that version, or maybe let's say, for example, an enrollment system, they've been using it every single day. And for that, they have this version that is specifically used for enrollment, for POS system, for mobile application. But however, if project is temporary, it has a start and an end. When does a project become maintainable? Or when does a project being built continuously? And that is why we're moving on to the next topic, which is project and operation. The difference between a system that is new and maintained. So a project that becomes an operation. So a project is temporary. As I recalled earlier, it has a start and an end. It is a temporary effort, right? It creates something new every single time. When we say operation, it is an ongoing process, maintains an existing work, and it is continuous. Now, operation is still a project, but it is a project that is updated over time. That is a definition of in operation. Now, to put it into a visual example, this is an example of what? A project and operation. So the common thing here is that they are centered of the brand Apple, right? And Apple is an operation. They manufacture new phones, they manufacture new products or new projects, or updating different types of OS devices, and maybe remove the production of the old versions of iPhone. Let's say iPhone 5. There's no production in iPhone 3 or from the older versions. For the project, it's just a specific brand or a specific manufactured project from that manufacturer. Let's say from this, we create what? A new version of iPhone. It has a start and an end. When does Apple deliver this type of version of that phone? So those are the key things that we have to remember. In order for us to solidify the concept of project and operation, I want you to actually answer this couple of questions before we move on to the next topic. Is it a project or an operation? For this example, Android OS, is it a project or an operation? I'll give you 5 seconds to answer it. Okay, so it's an operation because Android OS over time is updated in every devices. There are a lot of versions of Android out there. It could be a project, maybe, but there are newer version of phones that uses different types of version of Android that delivers more advanced key features. So it is an operation. It is an ongoing process, and it's continuous. Next example is creating a game. Is it a operation or is it a project? I give you 5 seconds. All right, it is a project because every game or every game project, is pretty much self-explanatory. It has a start and an end. When you say games, it usually have a start date on when are we going to start developing this game, and then it always has an end point where they start selling off that game. So the only thing that it becomes an operation is that companies making new versions of that game. But mainly, the game specifically in itself is a project. Another example is process customers' orders every day. Is it a project or an operation? good. And it's an operation because you process it every single day. It's pretty much self-explanatory. We maintain the version, or we maintain the order. Our order is a continuous flow in processes or processes in terms of customer orders. Next is process student enrollments every semester. When we say process, it is still continuous. So it's pretty much self-explanatory. It is operation. Very good. Now, before we move on to the next topic, we have to review first. And project is what? A project is a temporary effort. It has a start and an end. When we say operation, it is continuous. It is a project before that it is maintained over time, and it has no clear end because it's maintained over time. But it is a project, but it's maintained. A project has start and an end, or a clear beginning and an end, and it properly defines a end goal. So those are the things that we have to remember. The difference between project and operation. Now, before we move on to the next topic, let's further review about IT project. An IT project has clear beginning and an end. It defined objectives, limited resources, and specific deliverables. Now, those are the key things that we have to remember in order for us to define what project is. Now, relating to your school or system, every project always starts with a date. An instructor could give you start thinking of a project or system today, and then let's work on different types of milestone. Now, milestones are like your stepping stone in order for you to actually meet the requirements required in that milestone. So let's say, for example, there are different milestone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then for milestone 1, you start building the building blocks or the prototype of the conceptualization of your project. And then by milestone 2, you start developing the project and so on. We're going to be encountering it later. It's just like a side note for us to remember what project is. So once again, we review project is a temporary effort that creates different types of system, a unique system that solves a problem. And an operation, it is a project before that is maintained, and it is continuous. Now let's move on to the project constraints. Every IT project has limitation. So do you agree with that scenario? Every project has limitations. Now, sir, what is this limitation? A lot of people would think that limitation is something that could somehow make the project fail because it's limited, right? But this limitation are actually the guardrails, or let's say the limits of the project that you create. The reason why is that there are what we so-called constraints. Now, these are the 4 constraints: the scope, time, cost, and quality. These are the limitations of your project. What is the highest scope or highest features that you could provide to your system, because we cannot exceed to one because it could not be related to the project that you're building, or the realistic time and when do you set a deadline to deliver your project. For the cost is what is the resources used and the budgeting of your project, and the quality is the being able to accept feedbacks to your project. So those are the 4 constraints. Let's discuss them one by one. Scope is what will the project deliver, or what are the project features. A say example is login forms, attendance tracking, and enrollment forms. There's a lot of examples actually. Scope is more of like a features. Let's say, for example, if you created an ordering system, what are the features that an ordering system has? It has a login form. It has different types of clients controlling the system. It has different products that you could actually order or the client can order, and so on. Those are the scope. Those are the limiting factors, or those are the limiting features that makes up a whole ordering system. So the reason, you get the idea of being limited, right? You get the idea of putting a set of limit. Of course, if you don't put a limit to a specific thing, let's say, for example, if we don't add limitation to a scope, let's say we add an ordering system, and for ordering systems, we add what? Unrelated to, or we add things that aren't really related to the ordering system itself. You added what? You added Let's say what's a good example for ordering system that is not related, or a feature that is not related to ordering system. We add like let's say an enrollment form to the we add an enrollment feature in our ordering system. That doesn't make any sense, right? So those are the things or the factors why we need to have some sort of limitation of building a project, so that we are more specific to the problems that we're trying to solve. Okay, so moving on to time. When should the project be completed? Could be 2 weeks, 1 month, or was there a lifetime waiting for us? So it's still a time, of course. So these are the realistic time that, it asks the question of when does this project be completed. We have specific milestones that we need to meet deadlines in order for us to create realistic, achievable goals in building our system. Next is cost. What resources are available? Could be budget, could be the laptop or software. Now, these key things that builds up the system in itself. And lastly is quality. Does the system meet the requirements? Example, works correctly, reliable, easy to use, meets user needs. These are your clients' feedback. These are your leaders' feedback. These are your members and advisors' feedback whenever or before you deliver your system. Now, what happens if one of these constraints are going to remove? Do you think the project will pass, or do you think the project will fail? Now, let's have some thought experiment before we review everything. Let's say, for example, if I have these four constraints here: scope, time, cost, and quality. If I remove the quality, meaning that if I remove the feedback of the user, your advisors, remove the feedbacks or any additional feedback from your project, do you think that scope, time, cost would make the project pass? Let's say you have features. Let's say you already meet the deadline, you have a budget, but you don't have feedbacks from your clients. Do you think the project will pass? Of course, there are low chance of your project being able to succeed. Next is scope, time, cost, quality. We remove the scope, we remove the feature. What's left is quality, cost, and time. What do you think will happen to the project? So without a scope or feature, a simple login form or a simple concept of your system, but you already have cost, it means that it it, it it's sort of like you didn't start at all. It's sort of like your system doesn't exist because you don't have a scope yet. So do you think the project will pass? No. Because what's left is quality, cost, and time. There's no feature or there's no system that is being represented. Next is scope, time, cost, and quality. Now, if we remove the cost, we don't have the resources that we're going to be used. We don't have the laptops. We don't have the computers. We don't have the actual budget to actually host our website. What's left is scope, time, and quality. Do you think we can deliver the project? Do you think the project will succeed? No. So it must come with four of these. And lastly, what happens if we remove the time? A realistic deadline. So there are no telling of us when are we going to deliver the product because we don't have a realistic end goal. So it is must be not a project because there's no realistic end goal, there's no realistic time to start. So four of these constraints must come together. Now, before we move on or end this session, I'd like to actually review everything. An IT project is now, I'd like to ask you a question. An IT project is a temporary effort. An IT project or a project has a start or a clear start and an end. It has a specific end goal and it follows a constraint. When we say operation, it is a project but it is continuous. It is maintainable and also it is a manufactured continuous effort. Now, what are the four constraints? There is scope, time, cost, and quality. Scope is more of a feature. Time is to set deadlines or realistic end goals. The cost is your resources, your budget, your equipment's used for building the project. And quality is what? Quality is the feedback from your project. Okay, so a project is considered successful when it meets user and stakeholder requirements. These are your quality. It delivers on time. This is your time. Stays within the budget. This is from your costing or resources. Functions correctly and reliably. This is from your scope. So each follows, the project is successful when it meets what? The four constraints. One is, once again, IT project is a temporary effort. Operation is a project that is continuous. Project has a start and an end, and has a clear end goal. And the fourth constraint is scope, time, cost, and quality. All right, so to end this session, I want you to answer our check for understanding. You have to form a small group activity, constraint identification. You can actually read the module that I provided as well in our session one. And I've already uploaded all the materials there, additional information aside from this video. And you have to read the instruction carefully so that you can answer this one and submit your papers. So using one IT project idea, identify one realistic constraint per category. You have to label scope, time, cost, and resources. The quality is, for my feedback, that's the quality. That's the feedback if your specific project is realistic or not. So I'm going to evaluate that. That's on the quality part. So what you're going to write is scope, time, costs or resources. No, costs and resources are actually quite the same. And you don't have to actually put plus here. You can just put a bulleted point for each of these. So if you want to add attendance tracking, add some more features, you can put bulleted point, what's within that attendance tracking system, and so on. So think of one system first, and then add a time on when are you going to deliver or build this project. And then for cost and resources, what are the things that you need to use? Could be members, or could be researchers, and so on. So those are the things you have to consider. So I'm going to be checking that today, or I'm going to be checking that once you pass your check once you pass your less practice for understanding activity in today's session. And before we actually end this video, now we identify the four constraint, which is the scope, time, quality and cost. How do we apply these to make an effective project? Okay, because we've already discussed on the building blocks in creating the project, but the thing is, how do we properly execute in creating this project? What are the proper methods or methodologies? That's going to be on our module 1 session 2 uh, topic, which is waterfall and agile methodologies. But for now, I want you to answer the check for understanding, which is in the Google Classroom that I've already sent. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and I see you guys to the next session of our lesson.